I woke up to the smell of burnt coffee and cleaning solution. The garage floor was cold against my back, even through the sleeping bag. Fluorescent light hummed overhead. She'd left it on again, either by accident or to make a point. I could hear muffled voices through the ceiling, her laughter carrying down through the floorboards. Sarah was on the phone with someone, probably her sister. She always laughed louder when she had an audience. I pushed myself up slowly, folded the sleeping bag with precise corners, and stacked it against the tool bench. My phone showed 6:47 a.m. I'd been sleeping out here for 11 nights. You don't get to complain about being tired when you contribute nothing to this household. That's what she'd said the night she pointed to the garage door. Not suggested, pointed. Her fingers steady, her voice flat, like she was directing a stranger to the restroom. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, finishing a compliance report for work. She'd come home late again, smelling like wine and perfume that wasn't hers. When I asked where she'd been, she turned it around on me. Said I was controlling. Said I was making her feel trapped. Said if I couldn't handle her having a life, I could sleep somewhere that matched my contribution to hers. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I closed my laptop, picked up my pillow, and walked to the garage. My heart didn't race. It stopped for just a second, then settled into something slower, colder. She stood in the doorway watching me arrange the sleeping bag, her arms crossed, waiting for me to fight back. When I didn't, she turned off the light and closed the door. She had no idea what she'd set in motion. My name is Michael Harrison. I'm 52 years old, and I've spent the last 19 years building a life I thought was permanent. I work in operations management for a mid-sized logistics company, the kind of job nobody asks about at parties because it sounds exactly as boring as it is. Inventory systems, compliance audits, process optimization. I've been doing it long enough that I can solve most problems in my sleep, which is useful when you're actually sleeping in a garage. Sarah and I met at a mutual friend's wedding. She was 28, working in event planning, full of energy and ideas about the kind of life she wanted. I was 33, stable, ready to settle down. She said she liked that I was calm, steady, not like the other guys she dated who were all flash and no follow-through. We married 10 months later in a small ceremony by the lake. For the first few years, it felt like we were building towards something. We bought the house together, split the mortgage, talked about kids someday, but somewhere around year 7, the language changed. My opinions became suggestions she could ignore. My concerns became complaints she had to manage. When I bring up the credit card bills, gentle, never accusing, she'd sigh like I was being petty. When I asked if we could eat dinner together more than twice a week, she'd remind me she had a social life and I should get one too. When I mentioned that her sister had been staying in our guest room for 5 months without contributing to groceries, Sarah looked at me like I'd suggested we abandon a family member on the street. I let it go. I let a lot go. The night she sent me to the garage wasn't the first time something had cracked. It was just the first time the crack went all the way through. 3 weeks earlier, I'd found a receipt in her car. Dinner at a steakhouse downtown. $240. I recognized the date. It was the night she told me she was working late on a client event. I didn't confront her. I took a picture of the receipt and put it back exactly where I found it. 2 days later, I checked our joint credit card statement. There were 4 more charges I didn't recognize. A boutique hotel in the next county. Flowers from an online florist, sent to an address I didn't know. A charge for concert tickets. She'd told me she hated concerts, said the crowds gave her migraines. I sat at the kitchen table that afternoon with all of it laid out in front of me. Receipts, bank statements, text message logs I'd backed up from the phone bill. I wasn't angry. I was doing what I do at work, gathering data, identifying patterns, preparing documentation. Sarah came home around 7, dropped her purse on the counter, barely looked at me. "We need to talk," I said. She glanced at the papers spread across the table, and something flickered across her face. Not guilt exactly, but inconvenience. Like I'd brought up something tedious she didn't have time for. "About what?" She opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of white wine, poured herself a glass without offering me one. About where you've been spending money, about who you've been spending time with. She took a long sip, set the glass down slowly, leaned against the counter with her arms crossed. Her voice was calm, almost bored. Michael, you're being paranoid. Those charges are for work, client dinners, networking events. You wouldn't understand because you don't work in a field that requires relationship building. The hotel charge? I told you, the client event ran late. I didn't want to drive home tired. You told me you were staying at your sister's that night. She blinked once, adjusted her bracelet, picked up her wine glass again. I don't have time for this. If you're going to act like some jealous detective, maybe you should sleep somewhere else tonight. Somewhere that matches how much you actually contribute to this household. She said it so casually, like she was suggesting I pick up milk on the way home. Then she pointed to the garage door. Not with anger, with finality. Like the decision had already been made and I was just catching up to reality. I stood up slowly, gathered the papers, slid them into a folder, closed my laptop. She watched me, sipping her wine, waiting for the fight. When I picked up my pillow and walked to the door, she actually looked surprised. You're seriously going to sleep in the garage? You told me to. I didn't think you'd actually. I closed the door behind me before she finished. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. The first 3 nights in the garage, I didn't sleep much. I lay on the sleeping bag staring at the ceiling, listening to her footsteps above me, the sound of the TV, the shower running. On the 4th night, I stopped listening. I pulled out my laptop and started making lists. I opened a new checking account at a different bank, transferred exactly half of our joint savings, my half legally, though I knew she'd see it as theft. I printed out 3 years of credit card statements and highlighted every charge I hadn't made. I downloaded our phone records and flagged the number she'd been texting most frequently. I made an appointment with an attorney named Daniel Greaves, someone a colleague had recommended after his own divorce. I didn't feel angry, I felt focused. Sarah didn't come to check on me, not once. She'd leave for work in the morning without opening the garage door, come home late, go straight upstairs. On the 6th night, I heard her on the phone with her sister. He's being ridiculous, sleeping in the garage like some martyr. I told him if he's going to act like a child, he can sleep wherever he wants. Her sister's voice was muffled, but Sarah's response was clear. No, I'm not apologizing. He's the one who accused me of cheating. He went through my phone, my receipts, like some controlling psycho. I'm done walking on eggshells. I took a screenshot of the timestamp, added it to the folder. Silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. On the 8th day, I met with Daniel Greaves in his office downtown. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. I slid the folder across his desk. He opened it, flipped through the bank statements, the receipts, the phone records. He didn't react, just took notes in careful handwriting. How long have you been married? 19 years. Joint assets? House, 2 cars, retirement accounts, joint savings, what's left of it. Her income versus yours? I make about 70% of our household income. She works in event planning, but most of her income is commission-based. Irregular. He nodded, made another note. And you've been sleeping in the garage for how long? 8 nights. Did she force you out or did you leave voluntarily? She told me to sleep there. I complied. His pen stopped moving. He looked up. You complied. Yes. Why? I thought about that for a moment. Why had I just walked out to the garage instead of standing my ground? Why had I folded the sleeping bag every morning and stacked it neatly like I was a guest in my own house? Because I wanted to see what she'd do, I said. If she'd apologize, if she'd realize what she was asking, if she'd care. And did she? No. Daniel closed the folder. Good, that helps us. Document everything. Every night you sleep out there, every conversation, every text message. Don't engage, don't argue, just record. When we file, we want a pattern of behavior that shows constructive eviction, and financial infidelity. I checked the time. 2:14 p.m. I had to be back at work in 40 minutes. How long does this take? Depends on her response. If she contests, 6 months to a year. If she's smart, she'll settle. She won't settle. He smiled, but it wasn't warm. Then we'll be thorough. That night, Sarah finally came to the garage. She opened the door without knocking, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. I was sitting on an old folding chair, reading a book under the fluorescent light. "We need to talk," she said. I marked my page, closed the book, looked at her, waited. "This is getting ridiculous, Michael. You're embarrassing both of us. The neighbors are asking questions. What are you telling them? That you're going through something. That you're stressed about work." "Not the truth, then." Her jaw tightened. "The truth is that you accuse me of cheating based on some receipts and paranoid assumptions. The truth is that you're punishing me for having a life outside this house." I stood up slowly, walked over to the workbench, picked up my phone, pulled up the photo I'd saved, the hotel receipt, the florist charge, the concert tickets. I held the phone out to her. "Explain these." She glanced at the screen, then back at my face. For just a second I saw it, the calculation, whether to keep lying or pivot to anger. She chose anger. "You went through my purse? My credit cards? What is wrong with you? You used our joint account. I have every right to see those charges. This is exactly why I need space from you. You're controlling. You're suffocating. I can't live like this." She turned to leave. I spoke before she reached the door. "I've filed for divorce." She froze, turned back slowly. "What?" "I met with an attorney this afternoon. He's drafting the papers. You'll be served next week." Her face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Disbelief, fury, fear. The fear was what I'd been waiting for. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." "Over what? Some receipts? Some misunderstanding?" "Over the fact that you told me to sleep in the garage and haven't checked on me once in 11 days. Over the fact that you've been lying about where you've been and who you've been with. Over the fact that when I asked you to explain, you called me paranoid and controlling instead of telling me the truth." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something softer, almost pleading. "Michael, come on, we can work this out. We've been together 19 years. You're going to throw that away over some stupid argument?" "You threw it away when you pointed to that door." Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at it reflexively, then back at me. I saw the name on the screen before she turned it face down. A man's name I didn't recognize. "You should answer that," I said. "Sounds important." She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Like the man standing in front of her was a stranger. Maybe he was. "I'm not signing anything," she said. "You don't have to. The court will decide." She left without closing the door. I waited until I heard her car start, then I walked back to the workbench and added the conversation to my notes. Time, 8:47 p.m. Witness, none. Outcome, refusal to acknowledge, deflection to control narrative. I should have seen it sooner. The late nights, the expensive gifts she bought herself, the way she flinched when I touched her shoulder. I should have asked harder questions years ago. But I'd wanted to believe that silence was kindness, that patience was love. I'd confused accommodation with partnership. I wouldn't make that mistake again. The papers were served on a Tuesday morning. I know because Sarah called me 17 times between 9 a.m. and noon. I didn't answer. She left voicemails, first angry, then confused, then crying. I saved them all. By the afternoon, her sister was calling, then her mother, then a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be the man from the hotel receipt. He left a message asking me to be reasonable and think about what I was doing to Sarah. I blocked his number and forwarded the voicemail to Daniel. At work, I kept my head down. My supervisor noticed I seemed distracted, asked if everything was okay. I told him I was managing some personal matters, but it wouldn't affect my performance. He nodded, didn't push. That's the thing about operations work. People respect boundaries when you set them clearly. Sarah tried a different approach. She started leaving notes on my car windshield. Long, handwritten letters about how much she loved me, how we could fix this, how she'd made mistakes, but so had I. She used words like our journey and growing together and partnership. She didn't mention the hotel. She didn't mention the lies. She didn't apologize for the garage. I photographed each note before throwing it away. 3 weeks into the process, Daniel called me into his office. He had new documents spread across his desk. Financial records Sarah's attorney had been forced to disclose. He slid one page toward me. Did you know about this account? It was a credit card I'd never seen before. Opened in Sarah's name 2 years ago. The balance was $43,000. Every charge was restaurants, travel, shopping. None of it familiar. No, I said. I've never seen this. She's been making minimum payments out of a separate checking account, also undisclosed. The account is funded by transfers from your joint savings. Small amounts, 100 here, 200 there, over the course of 18 months. I felt my jaw tighten. How much? 22,000 transferred out of your joint account into hers, then used to pay the minimum on this card while she kept spending. Daniel tapped the page. This is financial infidelity. She systematically moved marital assets to fund a lifestyle she hid from you. In this state, that's grounds for an unequal division of remaining assets in your favor. I checked the time. 3:31 p.m. Outside the window, traffic moved slowly through downtown. People going home to lives I couldn't imagine anymore. What happens now? We bring this to her attorney. Give them 48 hours to respond. If they don't have a good explanation, we push for settlement with terms favorable to you. And if she refuses? Then we go to court, and a judge sees all of this. I stood up, shook his hand, walked back to my car. My phone buzzed. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. The mediation happened in a conference room at Daniel's firm, neutral territory. Sarah arrived with her attorney, a woman named Catherine Chen, who looked efficient and expensive. Sarah's eyes were red, her makeup uneven. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the last month had compressed her. We sat across from each other at a long table. Daniel placed a folder in the center. Catherine glanced at it, then at him. What's this? Financial discovery, undisclosed credit card, undisclosed checking account, systematic transfer of marital assets over 18 months. Catherine opened the folder. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her shoulders stiffen. She looked at Sarah. Did you disclose these accounts to me? Sarah's voice was quiet. I didn't think they mattered. They matter. Catherine closed the folder, turned to Daniel. What are you proposing? Daniel slid a second document across the table. Client keeps the house, his retirement accounts, and 60% of remaining liquid assets. Client's wife keeps her car, her retirement accounts, and assumes full responsibility for the undisclosed credit card debt. No alimony either direction. Clean break. Sarah's head snapped up. 60%? That's not fair. We built that savings together. I spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. We built it together. You spent it alone. Her face crumpled. Michael, please, I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We don't have to do this. You told me to sleep in the garage, Sarah. You pointed to the door like I was a dog. You didn't check on me for 11 days. You didn't apologize. You didn't ask if I was okay. You just let me stay out there while you went on with your life. I was angry. I didn't mean you meant it. And when I showed you proof that you'd been lying, you called me controlling. When I filed for divorce, you called me 17 times in 3 hours. Not because you missed me, but because you were scared of losing what I provide. Catherine put a hand on Sarah's arm, but Sarah shook it off. So that's it? 19 years and you're just done? I looked at her across the table, really looked at her. I tried to see the woman I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and fall asleep on my shoulder during movies. I tried to feel something other than exhaustion. I didn't break anything, Sarah. I stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face, and for just a moment I saw something real there. Regret, maybe, or just the recognition that this was actually happening and she couldn't charm or cry her way out of it. Catherine spoke quietly to her, then turned to Daniel. We need time to review. You have 48 hours. After that, we file and let the court decide. I stood up. Sarah reached for my hand across the table. Michael, please, don't do this. I pulled my hand back gently. You already did it. I'm just finishing what you started. I left the conference room without looking back. Daniel followed me into the hallway. That went better than expected. She'll sign? If she's smart, her attorney knows that credit card is a nuclear bomb. No judge will look kindly on systematic deception. I nodded. My chest felt tight, but not with sadness. With something lighter. Relief, maybe. Or just the absence of weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. 2 days later, Catherine called Daniel. Sarah would sign. We finalized the settlement the following week. I moved out of the garage and into a one-bedroom apartment near the office. Small, clean, quiet. The first morning I woke up there, I made coffee in my own kitchen, sat by the window, watched the sunrise without anyone telling me I was doing it wrong. I changed the locks on my future, deleted Sarah's contact from my phone, boxed up the last of my things from the house, and hired movers to bring them to the apartment. I didn't take anything that wasn't clearly mine. No fighting over furniture, no arguing about wedding photos. I just took what I needed and left the rest. The final papers arrived on a Thursday. I signed them at my kitchen table with a pen I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Not ceremonial, just deliberate. I scanned them, emailed them to Daniel, and dropped the hard copies in the mail. It was done. That night, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of whiskey and watched the traffic below. The air was cool, almost cold, the kind of temperature that makes you aware of your own breathing. I thought about the last 6 months, the garage, the folders of evidence, the mediation table, Sarah's face when I'd walked out. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt unburdened. Silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's the only honest response when words have been used to obscure the truth for too long. I'd spent 19 years trying to be the calm one, the steady one, the one who let things go. I thought that made me strong, but strength isn't just endurance. Sometimes it's knowing when to stop carrying something that was never yours to carry in the first place. I should have left sooner. I should have trusted my instincts when I first found those receipts. But I'd wanted to be wrong. I'd wanted to believe that love was enough to paper over the cracks. It wasn't. If you had been in my place, would you have stayed and fought for the marriage? Or would you have walked away the moment she pointed to that door? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence means more than you know. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe. Let's keep walking this road together.